Welcome back into Iggy Sports Talk. I'm your host, Jake Iggy, or Iggy for short. I want to thank you so much for tuning into this episode. And if you're tuning in to hear more about the 2024 NFL Draft, you are in the right place. I've been doing everything I can over the last few weeks to give you as much info as possible leading up to this year's NFL Draft. 2 weeks ago, I had on field Yates to speak about the mental traits that we've seen so far from the quarterback prospects throughout the process. In the last episode, I spoke with Mike Tannenbaum about which trades we could see regarding quarterbacks, as well as which teams who we aren't expecting to draft quarterbacks still could draft a quarterback, whether it's in the first or second round. And in this episode, I'm speaking with, once again, draft analyst for ESPN, Field Yates, but this time, I want to talk to him about more of the nitty-gritty aspects of this year's draft. I speak to him about which quarterback he could potentially see slide in the draft, kind of like we saw last season with Will Levis. Just a little bit of a refresher. Will Levis was one of the top 3 quarterbacks in last year's draft, and nobody expected him to drop that far into the draft. And it was kind of sad to see sort of them panning to him every 2 seconds. And, I'm pretty sure his girlfriend at the time got pretty famous from getting all that different screen time. But, we've seen it in the past with a guy like Aaron Rodgers dropping as much as he did. But there's just so many quarterback prospects throughout this draft, but also a lot of quarterback needy teams. So it was curious to hear sort of Fields' thoughts on that. And then I also asked him a little bit about what he thinks the Patriots could do with the number 3 overall pick. We heard from JJ McCarthy's pro day, there was some rumblings that the new general manager for the Patriots, Eli Wolf, was mentioning that the Patriots could potentially draft JJ McCarthy with that 3rd overall pick. Now, Drake Maye has been slid into that pick, and majority of the mock drafts that have come out in Fields' latest mock draft, Maye was in that spot. And then JJ McCarthy was drafted just 2 picks behind him, going to the Minnesota Vikings. But it's a lot of question marks regarding that 3rd overall pick. Will Jaden Daniels be drafted by the Commanders with that number 2 overall pick, or will Drake Maye go to that number 2 pick? And I think it all kind of depends with the Patriots, the best guy that they can get in that number 3 spot. But it was interesting to hear Field's thoughts on both of those fronts. But before we get into my conversation with Field, make sure that you are subscribed to Iggy Sports Talk, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on Apple Podcasts or wherever audio platform that you usually use for podcasts, to make sure that you are getting updated when episodes drop for information like this right here before some of these big moments. I have tons of other episodes leading up to the NFL draft to help you be as prepared as possible for one of the biggest events throughout the NFL offseason. But now, without further ado, I've waited long enough to give you guys this interview. So here is Field Yates. How's it going, Field? Really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem.
I was just curious, we saw last year with Will Levis, he dropped a little bit in the draft, was due to a little bit of an injury. But I was curious from, this draft in terms of the quarterbacks, could you see any of those players sliding down a little bit more than what they've been projected so far?
Yeah, I would say this is that there are 4 quarterbacks that I feel really good about going in the first round. And there are 2 others where I think the range is just massive. I think there's a chance that Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. goes in the first 15 picks. I think it would be unlikely that both of them go in the first 15 picks. But if either of them slides beyond that range, then you start to say to yourself, most teams, I would say really beyond the Raiders at pick number 13, have their quarterback situation lined up for this upcoming season. There might be a couple where you could say they need to, be mindful of the future, whether it's the Rams at 19, given that Matthew Stafford is, year to year at this point, even the Steelers at pick 20, because while they did add both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, each is on, for now, a 1-year deal. They have the opportunity to exercise that 5th-year option for Justin Fields by the time the draft rolls around for 2025. But the bigger point remains that, most teams in the back half of the first round are going to be more inclined to fill those non-quarterback needs at the moment. So I have said this publicly. I'll reiterate it again here that Bo and Mike are 2 of the most difficult players for me to forecast exactly where they'll go. I don't think there are too many players that are top 50 players on my board that I think have, let's call it 30 slot range, where they could go 12th, they could go 42nd, and neither would surprise me. But that's sort of innate to the quarterback position. You mentioned Will Levis. We have seen other quarterbacks that have experienced a similar fall. some all the way out of the first round, some to the very last pick of the first round, like Lamar Jackson in 2018. But I feel really good about 4 going in the first, probably 10 or 11 picks at worst. And then Bo and Mike are the 2 wild cards to me of that quarterback class.
In terms of the 3rd overall pick, we heard in, JJ McCarthy's pro day that Elliott Wolf, there was some rumblings that, he could be interested in taking JJ at that number 3 pick. I see that you have Drake Maye in that slot in your mock draft, but curious how much you read into some of those rumors and if there could be a possibility that they could look at JJ over Drake in that number 3 overall pick.
Here's what I would say is I don't rule anything out at this juncture. We're 3 weeks away. I think we all know that there's so much unpredictability that is innate to the NFL draft. I would be surprised exclusively on these grounds. I don't think the tape is the same level at all for JJ McCarthy as it is Drake Maye, Jaden Daniels, and Caleb Williams. In whatever order you want to put those 3. It's a little bit of a sample size thing, and JJ McCarthy has quality tape, no doubt about that. There were some key throws and some huge games. I mean, this team went 15-0. They won the national championship game last season. But like anything in life, the larger the sample size you have, the more confidence you have that your belief about something is accurate. So that's what I keep coming back to for JJ McCarthy relative to somebody like Drake Maye. It starts to feel like right now, and I could be wrong, it started to feel like it's a JJ versus Drake conversation for who is the best bet to go number 3, with obviously Caleb Williams likely headed for Chicago, and it sounds more and more like Jaden Daniels going to Washington number 2 overall. And I'm going to stand firm on my belief that Drake Maye has just such incredible upside, and the Patriots, if they stand pat at number 3 and the first 2 picks go like I expect them to, that to me, it would be a decisive choice to take Drake Maye.
And would you guess if they do take Dre that they'll probably have him back up Jacoby Brissett?
Again, this is an April 4th projection, but I think the Patriots feel internally like the plan is for Jacoby Brissett, regardless of what takes place in the draft on April 25th, will begin the season as their starter. And coach starting quarterback proclamations in April and March can often prove fleeting. But the Patriots, a few years ago, different regime, obviously, but Bill Belichick, kept saying Cam Newton was a starter when Mac Jones was drafted until he wasn't. So that would be the kind of situation that I could see for the Patriots as well. The plan would be Jacoby Brissett. And I guess if I had to forecast 2 starts in week 1, it would be Brissett. But when you have a guy you take 3rd overall in the draft, it's for a reason. And that reason is often that kid's got all kinds of talent, like either Jaden Daniels, Drake Maye, or JJ McCarthy would.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
I hope that you did enjoy my conversation with Field and got a little bit of a better understanding on which players could potentially fall in this year's draft. He did mention Michael Penix as one of those players, and in his latest mock draft, he actually has Penix falling into the 2nd round, getting drafted by the Las Vegas Raiders. And that's not honestly a huge surprise to me. There has been some reports that he could be a guaranteed 1st rounder, but with all the different injuries that he had throughout his college career, I wouldn't be surprised if teams are a little bit anxious on if they want to use a 1st round pick on a guy like Michael Penix. But I was also curious to hear him speak about the potential of either Maye or JJ McCarthy going to the Patriots. As a Patriots fan, as you can see if you're watching the video version, it was interesting to get a little bit of a better clarity on what could ultimately happen with that 3rd overall pick. And, the main reason why I asked him about, is Jacoby Brissett potentially going to be the guy to start over a guy like Drake Maye or JJ McCarthy is, mainly because, at least with Maye, many people have brought up that he is kind of a development project. So it wouldn't be super surprising whether it is the Commanders or it is the Patriots for him to potentially sit for the first year or, half of a season. And in the Patriots case, they've already signed a guy like Jacoby Brissett for that quarterback position, who's known to be really good at mentoring some of those younger players, as well as understands how to be a rookie quarterback in that New England Patriots system and in New England in general, because he was that guy in 2016 getting drafted out of the 3rd round. So very curious to see how everything does play out throughout, this draft process. But as I mentioned, if you want to stay updated about anything regarding this year's NFL draft, as well as you want to hear other episodes talking about sports or hearing about inspirational sports stories, which is usually the episodes that I post on this this podcast, you can subscribe to Iggy Sports Talk, whether you're watching on YouTube or whatever audio platform that you listen to. And if you want to get more updates regarding the podcast, you can follow over on Instagram. It's at Iggy Sports Talk. But as always, I greatly appreciate everybody tuning in, and I'll see you and talk to you next time. Peace.